Can you explain to me the left-wing equivalent of the El Paso, Texas shooting?
You guys killed 30 people in the COVID 2020 riots. Yeah. Anyways, next topic. We have to say all violence is wrong.
Hey guys, for today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, we're going to do something a little bit different and talk about some of the biggest stories of the week with two hugely influential online voices. One is a left-of-center YouTuber named Adam Mockler with over 1 million subscribers. And then from the right, we have Blaire White, the transgender Republican YouTuber who also has massive reach online. We talk about whether the left has a political violence problem or whether Republicans are the real culprits, given the recent spate of attacks and examples of political violence, both in real life and being glorified online. Plus, we mix it up over Elon Musk versus Trump and the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, where we actually find some agreement. All this is coming up. Buckle up. It was a feisty conversation, but I really enjoyed it. Do hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet, and let's get into it. All right, joining the show today, we've got left-wing YouTuber Adam Mockler and conservative YouTuber Blaire White. Thank you guys so much for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Yeah, so we're going to mix it up, hopefully have a constructive but calm conversation with some different viewpoints, some very different viewpoints with you two on the show today. But the first thing we have to talk about is something I think basically everybody agrees is horrible. I've seen it condemned across the spectrum, the political spectrum. That's the firebombing attack against several Jewish people who were protesting for the return of hostages. This comes just a week or so after a really terrible attack on 2 Israeli embassy employees. And I guess rather than get into the specifics of it, I think it's a launching point for an important conversation about something I'm concerned about, which obviously the Free Palestine movement is not exclusively, but is associated with the left. And the left in general, I'll start with you, Blaire. Does the left have a problem with violent extremism?
Well, not just that, but also a denial of it. Whereas I feel like obviously the right is not a stranger to violent extremism, but I feel like we kind of keep count of those people a little better. Like I think the right has always been painfully aware that we have the KKK people on our side, we have the Nazis, we have the people who are more prone to that, but those people have always been rightly, clocked as that. Whereas I feel like a lot of people on the left that engage in certain things don't ever get hit with the actual label of domestic terrorists or even just the adjective violent. You have the fact that there's still some people that debate whether Antifa was, it just means they're against fascism, or are they willing to do certain things with those beliefs that, we don't believe in as Americans because we don't believe in violence to get our point across. And ultimately, that's what separates us from countries and belief systems encoded into law in certain countries that actually permit violence and permit, murder in certain circumstances. It is really, really unfortunate. And I just hate it. As a Christian, I feel like I'm watching, these 2 other religions that are primarily on the other side of the planet. And I'm watching bloodshed and hatred. And it just feels like it's getting to a point where I don't really know where everything is going. And it makes you check yourself when you're talking about this stuff, that you don't want to say the wrong thing. It's like, I don't know. It's a lot. And it's a lot of responsibility to even commentate on it, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Obviously, blanket condemnation of violence, but it's also more complicated than that. But it's hard to put words to that sometimes, because it's time to sometimes be humble also, that like as Americans, we do not know what's going on over there to any sort of large extent. And it's a tough one.
Yeah, so I agree with you. We don't have the solutions to solve the hundreds and hundreds or even thousands of years long Israel-Palestine conflict here today. But Adam, to you, do you see this as a problem on the left, or do you think it's just isolated fringe figures?
I think that it's isolated fringe figures, but we have seen an increase of it happening. But any increase is absolutely trounced by the amount of right-wing violence we've seen over the past decade. If you want to talk about the recent firebombings, that dude was an Egyptian immigrant named Mohammed Salman. And I really don't think this dude was progressive or woke. I don't know his specific views, but I would have a tough time categorizing a lot of like either Islamic fundamentalists or people who support Israel-Palestine as left-wing. But even if I were to concede that, because I'm sure a lot are, absolutely, you still don't see even nearly the same amount of violence coming from the left that you've seen from the right in the past decade. If you want to talk about anti-Semitism in particular, there was a Tree of Life shooting, which killed, I believe, 10 people. There was another synagogue shooting a few years before that. The attacks on Black churches or synagogues far outweigh any college protest students that are like, screaming from the river to the sea. So I disagree with the fact that when Blaire said that the right seems to acknowledge their problem more, I also disagree. Or you said something to that effect. I don't want to misquote you, but you said the right seems to acknowledge the extremism problem they have. I disagree. I think you guys elected somebody who, in a top-down way, emboldens that extremism. If you want to talk about anti-Semitism in particular, Trump did have a dinner with Nick Fuentes a few years back. Even if you want to put that to the side, Trump has emboldened a lot of this anti-Semitic rhetoric over the past few years. So I think that when you want to talk about extremism, we should talk about, number one, the statistics. Let's ground it in reality with stats. We can compare the stats. 76% of extremist violence that is lethal has been done by right-wingers over the past decade. But also, let's look at the top leading figures in the party. Is there any figure in the Democratic Party that has used as much bombastic rhetoric as Trump? This isn't exactly like political extremism, but even on Memorial Day, Trump sent out this all caps Truth Social post. So the idea that the right acknowledges their extremism when the dude who they elected sends out these extreme ass posts and riles up his fan base, I disagree.
He posts crazy stuff for sure. You won't catch me denying that. I think the difference is, I'm not even going to necessarily quibble with you that, for example, the firebomber, not a left-wing guy. I don't know his personal politics. And there are these instances of like right-wing people committing heinous crimes. Like you
not
mentioned.
Instances. Sorry, it's a repeated pattern.
Okay, but the difference is like you won't find anybody who was like, yeah, the Tree of Life synagogue shooter was right. Whereas, I don't know, Adam, do you use TikTok? Because I have a specific question in mind.
Yeah, sort of, not as much as other
Have
Gen
you?
Zers, but
And
yeah.
I can for the audience, maybe I'll insert one here. But have you seen these somebody just do it videos all over TikTok? Do you know what I'm referencing?
Yep.
It's viral every day. You can't even scroll past it. And I don't have a left-wing algorithm.
This is for the person out there who's planning on doing it. The thing that we all wake up every day hoping we'll see in the news. And we're like, man, no one's done it yet. Keep going. Your plan, it's going to work. If not, it'll inspire the next person. And we are all rooting for you. You have our support. You have our admiration. We might make a national holiday out of you. And I will definitely put money on your books. And if you're into this sort of thing, I'll write you some letters of the naughty sort, should you find yourself behind bars for it. But we're all rooting for you and hoping that you do it quickly and get away with it. Power to the people.
Look at me right here. We all know it needs to be done, right? If I do it, are y'all going to convict me? Because somebody got to do it.
So can someone just do it? Can someone just do it? Just do it.
Every day that I wake up, I just hope someone takes one for the team. Just go out in a blaze of glory. We will always keep money on your book. We will write you letters every day. We'll put your face on prayer candles, build statues of.
The concern that I have, Adam, is not necessarily the perpetrators having one skew, because either way I can condemn them, but I see with the young progressive base, and there's extensive polling on this, like almost a genuine bloodlust, like an actual support for the assassination attempts against Trump, for violence against Tesla, against Elon Musk. You don't see that on your own side at all?
I do see it, but I want to ask the question to you. If I were to point to you Lindsey Graham's tweet where he said, I hope Greta knows how to swim, which you could argue is inciting violence, that's coming from a sitting senator who's 69 years old. You're talking about 22-year-old TikTokers. Can you point to me a Democratic
things that
Can you
are
point to me a
just like you
Democratic
said,
politician who has said something to that effect?
there are montage videos, and I encourage you to look them up, of Democratic politicians, celebrities, people in office, people as high up as Joe Biden and Kamala Harris making jokes about somebody killing Trump, somebody hurting Trump, violence all the time. You have Maxine, what is her name? Maxine Waters, the infamous, you have to surround people outside places. You had the transgender shooter at the Christian school. You had, I'm sure you don't even know this because most Democrats don't even know. I mean, or I can ask you, how many people do you think died during the COVID 2020 riots as a result of left-wing violence?
In the mid-20s?
It was almost 30. So people, this is what I mean. playing a tit for tat game of like what side's more violent. I guess you can just look at points in history and you can flip flop back and forth, or you can condemn it totally. And on top of that, you can go to the next step to acknowledge rather than just deny all the instances of violence on the left and say that they're isolated, because we can sit here and list every single instance. You could say, I could, list one right back. And then I could do just one by one for the almost 30 people during the COVID 2020 riots. And then I could be petty and compare that to January 6th, where only one person died and it was actual Trump supporter. So there's a million tit for tats. It's just about how violence is the thing that separates us from these countries that are about to take themselves and the rest of the world into World War III. Like it is what it is. It's viral every day. People saying to somebody, go kill Trump every day. And the same is not present on the right. Also, if you go to any of these left-wing protests right now that are, on the surface, it's just about being anti-Elon, being Trump. But if you go, and I've been to them because I've covered them and done videos, half the people are, holding signs supporting Luigi and wanting more death and more murder.
We'll come to Free Luigi. We'll come to it.
Okay, but it's just the point to be made. It's like to act like one side has a monopoly on violence or violent thought or words that you can consider, turning into violence later from the top down. Trump's the one that got shot at twice in the last election cycle. Like it's not even, but even so, we can just say F all violence. It's wrong.
Can I get a response to that after, Brad?
Yes, I will just read this polling data, and then Adam, I'll give you the floor for a couple minutes. So this is from a Tufts study in partnership with the Network Contagion Project. Murder justification, 31% and 38% of respondents said it would be at least somewhat justified to murder Elon Musk and President Trump, respectively. These effects were driven by respondents that self-identify as left of center, with 48 and 55% at least somewhat justifying murder for Elon Musk and President Trump, respectively. I don't know. I see it viral. I see it in the data. A real progressive sentiment here, Adam, but a few minutes for you to just respond.
Yeah, I'll respond to the Luigi stuff in 1 second, but Blaire said we could sit here for a while and go tit for tat on all of these different cases. I mean, not really. We can go tit for tat, but I'll tell you right now, 76% of extremist killings over the past decade were done by right wingers. So even if we put aside all anecdotes or all specific cases, or the idea that I could list off a name, then you list off a name, I don't want to do that either. So let's just look at the stats from the ADL or the FBI. It's 76% done by right wingers. A lot of them mass shootings. So then, sorry, I wrote down some of the notes so I didn't forget. Then Blaire said essentially that a lot of the TikTok algorithm is saying, like, there's a lot of videos of people saying something to the effect of just do it, just do it.
Viral every day.
Viral every day, sure, but I'd like to go back to one of my first points. Again, number one, look at the stats on who actually commits these crimes. But where is this coming from? In a top-down manner, are TikTokers trying to incite violence? Or is that different than...
Yes.
So really quick, I think, yes.
Yes.
Really quickly, and
there's endless montage videos of Democrat politicians engaging in that as well.
I can point to you guys trucks that Republicans used to drive where Biden was hog-tied in the back. I can point to you guys Trump calling for Mark Milley to be executed in slightly different words, calling him a traitor.
Trump got shot at twice, dude.
I can point to you. And was that a left winger or right winger doing it the first time or the second time? Wait,
100%.
Which one was a left winger doing it? Because
the first one was like well, first of all, I think the first one was an MK Ultra victim, if we're being honest. That's a little bit off the table. But
okay,
the
so
second
that wasn't
one,
a left winger.
But the second one, it was about Ukraine and they were on the left. Why is it so important to you that you guys don't have a monopoly on violence in your mind? Like, why is that such an important thing you're hanging on to?
It's not a monopoly on violence, but can you point to me one Democratic senator who has said something like Lindsey Graham said? And you keep saying there are these montages of people saying stuff, calling to kill Trump.
Lindsey Graham say?
So Lindsey Graham, I think I doubt that was meant 100% seriously, but I do think it's a contemptible comment for him to make about Greta getting drone striked by the IDF or whatever. I mean, if he meant that at all seriously, even if he meant it as a joke.
And it's not hard to say that's wrong. It's not.
A senator shouldn't say that.
We agree.
It's the weird denial of the fact that you can even say, it goes viral every day from Democrats saying they want to kill Trump, but Lindsey Graham's tweet.
Any calls to violence from people on the left on TikTok, that is terrible. But can you tell the difference between someone going into a Walmart in El Paso, Texas, and shooting 23 people dead with white supremacy ingrained on their rifle? And can you tell me exactly how this Luigi hype has manifested. So you guys are reading off some polls saying that like,
yes, we can do that. Like I said, I would rather avoid it, but there was also a non-binary transgender shooter who went into a Christian school and killed a bunch of angels, children of God themselves.
Okay, so if we went and played this,
do that, or we can just say violence is bad, and Brad should probably move on to the next topic because it's not difficult.
If we went and we played this tit for tat game, who would run out first?
It's wrong. Oh my, it's so weird.
It's weird because
no one on the right is denying.
Right?
No one on the right is denying that we have losers who do loser shit, and no one's denying that we have extremists on our side. I see it all the time, but there's this weird denial. The fact that you can even brush past how big of a deal it is. The argument ends when you can just say that every day it goes viral, the masses of Democrats calling for the murder of Donald Trump, who was already shot at twice.
Can I say one thing? Number one, I absolutely explicitly condemn it. But if we played this tit for tat game,
go to the next topic.
No. If we played this tit for tat game, who would run out of people first?
I'm not playing this.
Can you explain to me the left wing equivalent of the El Paso, Texas shooting?
You guys killed 30 people in the COVID 2020 riots. Yeah. Anyways, next topic. We have to say all violence is wrong.
A mass shooting versus 6 months of millions of people rioting and people dying. That's not like an intentional shooting done.
Riot, but okay.
Okay, but here's the thing. Riots done for political reasons where someone dies on accident is not the same as a white supremacist with white supremacism stuff like carved into his gun. Can you say? I have one final question, Blaire. Can you admit
more to the metric of like who's pro-violence or less pro-violence? Okay, if you want to take it to the macro rather than just like this many murder, which side is more pro-war right now? The left is inarguably more pro-war, so it's like what? They're more pro-violence as long as it's in a different country where they don't have to deal with it. It's just ridiculous. The bloodthirst is 100%. Has not always been, but it is absolutely tipped more on the left side right now. And it actually is better if we can just say all of it is wrong.
Like according to the FBI and the ADL, you guys commit more mass shootings. And then you cite BLM riots in response to the Walmart El Paso shooting, the Tree of Life synagogue, the Buffalo supermarket.
People
there was a
being
Charlottesville
killed.
riot. I mean,
people being killed by the dozens during riots, and that's not even counting all the injuries. That's not even counting all the property damage. There's more to terrorism. There's more to terrorism than just actual murder as well. There's a lot more to it. There's intimidation. There's running people out of cities by burning them down for 3 months straight. There's physically assaulting people, which you see all the time on campuses. Terrorism is not just literally ending a life. It's also physically harming people and using terror to incite to get what you want. The argument ends with the fact that every day it goes viral, you guys wanting to kill the president, and you guys are invariably, inarguably more pro-war, which means you just want more murder, but over here where it's not having to affect you. That's just objective speaking. That's objective.
My final point, if I can say one last thing, is that when you look at all the stats, of course, it's bigger on one side. When you look at who's actually perpetrating this, yes, any TikToker saying that, I will explicitly condemn. Anybody saying that, it's really dumb. Why would you call for violence in America?
Where it's like, okay, what about the 3 million likes per post that they get? It's like,
that's the concern.
Okay, what about Don Jr.? You guys support people killing people in the streets because you don't agree with their role in a health company. You guys agree with more war. You guys go viral every day for wanting to kill the president. And he got shot at twice. Your guy didn't get shot at. It is what it is.
Stop saying you guys. Like, I agree with this. Can you say
I would sit here and say that is wrong.
The point here is that I think whether it's, the El Paso incident, the Walmart shooting, whether it's this recent bout of political violence, I think we all agree it's morally wrong. But what I will say is no one really defends most of these things, but there is this widespread numerical polling-based support that we see in our algorithms with this content that's like joking. And I don't know, Adam, specifically on the Free Luigi point. So for context for listeners, this is Luigi Mangione, who is alleged, but like it's very clear that he did do it, in my view, to have killed a healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson. We have data on this as well. An Emerson college poll found that 41% of 18 to 29-year-old voters believe that the killing was somewhat or completely acceptable, compared to 40% who believe that it was somewhat or completely unacceptable. I mean, that scares me, and I guess we don't know the political affiliation of every one of those people, but I imagine many of them are progressives who want universal health care and all that. That scares me, because this is basically open support for political terrorism, assassinating people to send a political message. I mean, without mentioning Republicans, can you speak on that, Adam?
Yeah, I think that is definitely an extremist strain of thought. And I think a lot of people, especially the younger people, speaking as a young person, are a little bit morally confused on whether they understand why he did it, as in like the healthcare system is completely effed and we need better healthcare. And they're so morally confused that they take that to the next level where they think that they're okay with the entire act. And I'm not going to take it to Republicans, but I guess the question that I would pose is, how does this rhetoric online manifest in person? Because I guess I am going to take it to Republicans really quickly. When Trump spread all these things about Pelosi and Paul Pelosi and Nancy Pelosi, that manifested in the form of someone beating Paul Pelosi in the head with a hammer, and then Don Jr. made fun of it that same month. I want to ask Blaire.
I think that's wrong.
Okay, Blaire, I'm sure Blaire thinks it's wrong too, but Blaire, can you tell me like what Luigi supporters have done? Like how is this manifested is the question.
Well, first of all, Brad asked you to not bring up Republicans when just being able to say that murder is wrong and we shouldn't be glorifying it. So I want to point that out. But I also want to say, obviously the Paul Pelosi stuff was gross as well, but our guy got shot at twice. And
do you have an answer to the Luigi thing?
To pretend as if that is isolated from
Luigi supporters, we're talking about Luigi.
To pretend that is isolated from, you brought up Republicans, I can answer and talk about Republicans too, including them being shot by Democrats.
At least answer my question later.
I'll get there. But you talked about two things, so I'm going to answer you about two things.
Give Blaire a moment, Adam, and then I'll come back to you, and then we'll move along.
So,
but try not to interrupt.
To pretend as if Trump getting shot at twice was not the result of the worst near decade at the time of hateful rhetoric about Trump, regardless of how you feel about him. The amount of, like I said, things that you can point to that public figures have said, we have to take him out. Even just in pop culture, SNL, like with Snoop Dogg doing the thing, shooting him in the head, just over and over and over again. I was on tour when he got shot, and I just played a montage video, and it was 3 minutes long. Every Democratic person making jokes about killing him, taking him out back, and then he gets shot at twice. So that is an example, since you keep wanting the top down thing that's so important to you. The top down is there for sure. And then you see the bottom up, condoning top down comments like that going viral every day with Democrats wanting that. So it's okay with the people on the ground and it's okay with their leaders. That's just what it is. And to deny that is weird. But to answer about Luigi, first of all, to say what is it manifested to, I mean, that movement's a relatively new one. So I guess we probably shouldn't be holding our breath. I mean, it took a few years for Trump to get shot at too. But
he could kill again. Someone else could get killed.
100%.
I mean, Charlottesville
100%. Yeah. Here's where on a macro level, how that manifests and actually is toxic for society. It slowly muddies the water of morality, which you admitted to, that people are confused about what is right and what is wrong. When murder is the thing that people can't find perfect consensus to, okay, that's wrong, there's something deeply wrong. And any movement that supports it, like I said, I go to these protests, have a quarter, I'll be fair, a quarter of the people have like Luigi's hot signs, or we have to get a Luigi for Elon Musk or whatever. So because automatically within like the first few months of this movement, someone else hasn't died or something. I mean, that's not really saying much. It took a few years for them to try to kill Trump too.
Okay.
So
final word, just a moment for Adam, and then we're going to move to our next topic.
I know that I brought up Republicans when I wasn't supposed to, but I've shown a lot of restraint by not bringing up January 6th one time. Not once in this whole topic. I was expecting
you to bring it up right away, in fairness.
I mean, it would have been a decent argument to make, but there's a lot better statistical and, like top-down arguments. So I guess when it comes to the Luigi thing, if we want to go back to the original prompt, which is, does the left have a problem with extremism? Here's my final answer. There is a burgeoning problem with extremism on the left, but I think it's a function of extremism on both sides growing because of the social media environment that we find ourselves in. So when people are going out and doing these free Luigi protests, that's not unique to the left, this type of extremism. And in fact, like if you want to talk about extremism on the right, more than half of sitting Republicans are okay with January 6th or just like refuse to condemn it. Meanwhile, I'm pretty sure every Republican that you'd ask, save like maybe a few that won't be named, would be like, yeah, these protests calling for Luigi, saying Luigi's a good guy, that's terrible. So yes, does the left have a problem with extremist thought? I wouldn't say the left. I would say a small fraction of like people who protest. But at the same time, I don't even know how many of these pro Luigi socialist people vote Kamala or Biden at the end of the day. So is there a growing extremism problem? Yes, but
It
on both
doesn't
sides.
matter. There's still leftists. There's a lot of people on the right who fall into more of the Nazi camp who don't like Trump because he is not, anti-Jew enough for them. And they still, a lot of them didn't vote for Trump because they felt like he wasn't pro-life enough or he wasn't, whatever. So they're still on the right though. So
That
you
is
guys
fair,
still
but
have to take ownership for things that appear on that side of the political spectrum.
And I condemn it. As I'm sure you would condemn most of the attacks that I could list. But I guess if I framed it in this way to end it off, would you agree? If I said this, over the past decade, right-wing extremism has been more prevalent, and it still seems to be, but now there is a burgeoning problem of left-wing violence.
I don't believe, I know it's very difficult, for leftists to think that like answers that come up when they Google things aren't like 100% the truth. One of the factors on the right is we have a severe distrust of things like the FBI and the ADL. So I don't believe those numbers at their face. That's the first thing. The second thing is what you guys have to understand is you have a denial of the extremism. That's the main problem. You can't even get to seeing it because you're in denial of it. So you don't need to threaten anybody with bringing up January 6th because it would have been a dumb thing to bring up. I thought you were being smart by not bringing it up.
That would have been a silver bullet argument.
Because to compare a one-day thing for which one person who was on the team of the protesters died compared to 30 people losing their life over stupidity in the summer of 2020, all at the hands of Democrats, there isn't any comparison. So I actually thought you were being smart by not bringing that up.
Trump is the one who stirred up January 6th. What did Biden say about BLM? Did he say to stop the riots or keep the riots going?
He condemned it, but he was pretty muted.
About Black Lives Matter.
Up next, we're going to talk about the big, beautiful bill, the massive spending and tax package that the Trump administration is pushing. Republicans in Congress are hammering through, but the girls are fighting, as I like to say. Elon Musk is coming out and tweeting against this package pretty strenuously. He wrote, "I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it." So that's pretty strong language. Blaire, I'll come to you first because I know that you've been appreciative of Elon in the past, as have I, although I've personally soured on him quite a bit. But on this one, I'm Team Elon. I mean, the Trump administration keeps denying it, but this bill, the big, beautiful bill, which I kind of ridiculous name, but legislation often has ridiculous names, it would add somewhere between 3 to 5, I've even seen 6 trillion to the national debt over a decade. That to me is a betrayal of what MAGA voted for. Trump said he would reduce the debt or even balance the budget, not push through something that would explode it. Are you Team Elon or Team Trump on this?
I'm definitely Team Elon. I think that it takes conviction to, he's not falling into like welcoming arms or anything, or people don't want to give him, his flowers for actually dissenting. He's not going to get them. So it shows, conviction and courage. And so I appreciate that. And I agree, first of all, ugly abomination is crazy during Pride Month, so he should probably watch his mouth. But also, the bill is horrendous. The bill is horrendous, and the title of it, it's not confusing why they titled it. It's the same reason why Black Lives Matter call themselves Black Lives Matter. It's like you give it a name that sounds good, and then a certain percentage, 25% of the population is too low IQ to look past that. And you definitely see those Republicans on X who, don't understand that this does fall on, Trump's shoulders and it is his fault. The really bad things in the bill, like the stuff about how all 50 states can't regulate AI or decisions made by AI for the next 10 years. The amount of atrocities that can happen in a 10-year period with AI is really scary. And then obviously that's a trampling on states' rights to do that. So it's horrendous. And it's a reminder that, the older I get, at least, it's very clear that this is why maybe I get a little more like annoyed with the tit for tat stuff, because when you look at it, the left-right paradigm really is a scam in a lot of ways. It's not to say that voting left or right, depending on the climate and the situations and who's up for office, doesn't make sense on different times. So at different times, it will make sense to cast a vote a certain way. So it doesn't suddenly mean that it made more sense to vote for Kamala. If I had known this was going to come before I voted, I still would have voted for Trump for many reasons. But it's just a reminder that, we're getting F no matter what it is. It's really, scary.
Adam,
And especially when it comes to the surveillance state stuff that Trump pushes through, it's very I don't know. I'm no stranger to being disappointed by Trump. Obviously, like I call him the king of the vaccine. Been against that since the beginning, so it's no foreign concept that Trump on some things clearly gets the call from the people in the room that are the real president. So
well, I'll go to you, Adam, on this in particular. Let's not, I'll ask about Medicaid separately. So let's not get into that. Let's focus on the tax and deficit implications of the big, beautiful bill. For me, the deficit is my main concern because I'm a fiscal hawk. But I will say Democrats seem opposed to the idea of extending the Trump tax cuts at all from his first term. And were they not to do that, that's one of the main things this bill does. Most Americans would see a tax hike. Do you support that? Do you think most Americans should, or should they find a way to enshrine these cuts?
I want to go tit for tat with Blaire on this one. No, I'm just playing. I'm just joking. But
I was gonna say I'm not even in the question.
in all seriousness, well, first of all, just to back up for 1 second, and then we'll talk about the tax cuts and the permanence of them. I think that the bill just is antithetical to a lot of what Trump ran on, and I agree with a lot of what Blaire said. Some of it. He ran on, obviously, Doge cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. Now he's blowing up the debt. He ran on helping the middle and lower class. And this actually brings me into the taxes pretty perfectly, because while, yes, I do think the extension of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act would be solid. Without that, taxes would go up. It's more about the disproportionate permanence of the tax cuts for the richest of the rich. And then again, yeah, just the disproportionate tax cuts that go towards rich corporations. And then I know you said we'll get to Medicaid later, so I don't even want to dig into that. But one of the big problems Democrats have, I just want to caveat, Democrats aren't just mad that there are certain tax cuts. We're not even mad that the tax cuts from 2017 are extended. It's the fact that it seems very much so like you are pulling money from the House Energy and Commerce Committee, Medicaid in particular, to then make space for those tax cuts. That seems to be the problem of a lot of Democrats.
Yeah, we'll get into the Medicaid thing in a moment. But Adam, I'll just challenge you on this a little bit. It is true that if you run the numbers and see who do the tax cuts benefit the most, it will skew towards the upper echelons of income earners. But Adam, that's because they pay most federal taxes. If you look at federal income taxes, which is the main tax we're talking about here, it is disproportionately paid by the highest earners already. So if you're going to be cutting taxes, you're always going to end up with these numerical analyses that show up to, mostly benefits this. With the corporate tax as well, it's actually, there's economic literature on this, largely borne by workers through lower wages and lower investment. Even Democratic aligned tax organizations estimate that portion of it being borne as high as 1/3. So I guess the idea that these tax cuts mostly go to the rich, a majority of people will get a tax cut. A lot of the dollar total value may go to higher earners, but that's because they pay more taxes. Isn't that just part of a tax cut?
No, I definitely understand the fact that if you're paying $4 million, or if you're making $4 million, then you're going to be paying a lot more. But I guess my question that I would pose to you or Blaire is, how do you justify the permanence of the tax cuts towards the upper echelon? Meanwhile, like, the lower tax cuts expire again.
Well, all the tax cuts should be made permanent if they're going to make them, because in my view, as a fiscal hawk, the point of lowering taxes is to improve incentives and encourage people to invest more, work more. And if it's temporary, then it doesn't, because people plan in 5, 10, 15-year timelines. But what happens is they make them temporary as a budget gimmick to reduce the score from the Congressional Budget Office about how much it will add to the debt. If they made them permanent, then instead of the 3 to 5 trillion we've been talking about, it'd be a much bigger number. So that's why they do that. I'll bring in Blaire here. Do you think, though, with the kind of populist strain of MAGA, is it a bad look to be doing these tax cuts? I support them, right? But for richer people and corporations right now.
I don't really know. I know that one of the few good things about Trump is that he does allow sort of that core MAGA base to reel him in on certain things sometimes. Like I remember early on in his first term, he was sort of like jiggling the war bells against who was it? We almost literally went to war at the start of his
about
first
Iran.
term. Yeah. And then it started to, churn up again at the beginning of this term. And I feel like he's kind of dialing it down. Much more peaceful talk in the Middle East. He was there a few days ago. I'm not a fiscal hawk. I know that. I just hope that he makes decisions going forward that try to save his reputation with, pure MAGA, because I feel like that's going to be the right direction regardless. But I don't know.
Adam, so on the Medicaid issue, let's start with this, because there's all these estimates about how 7 million people or so will lose health insurance under the Medicaid cuts that are in the bill. First, do you think illegal immigrants should be covered by Medicaid?
Do I think illegal? No.
Okay, so to the extent that this bill removes people, that's one of the main Medicaid reforms, is that it cuts funding for states that do extend access to illegal immigrants for Medicaid, which is taxpayer-funded healthcare for illegal immigrants. To the extent that some of that 7 million is just those people being taken off the rolls, do you support that aspect of it?
I support it, but what I would say is that they are targeting $800 billion worth of cuts, correct?
About.
It might be a little bit under that. The immigrant thing will get you nowhere near that.
Another big piece of it, though, is the work requirements. Essentially, part of the number is, and part of the millions losing access is from them instituting work requirements, and then people don't comply with them and get kicked off the rolls. So you hear this sob story about how people are going to lose their health insurance, but the work requirements just require that you seek work or even volunteer or do other stuff. I mean, if we're going to kick people off who can't meet that standard, should I really feel bad about that, Adam?
It's not just a sob story, though. There was a study in 2023 done that shows that I believe 92%, like the vast majority of people covered by Medicaid, are either already working or they're not working for some reason that's like a qualified exemption. There's a good reason that Medicaid covers. So there's zero evidence that these work requirements will do what Trump wants them to do. But also, there was a study in Arkansas where they put work requirements in, and I think like 15,000 people lost their jobs because this created extra hurdles and extra red tape that disproportionately affected either disabled people or older people who didn't really know how to like go online and figure this shit out. Or there are harmful repercussions. And again, I want to go back to the point, when 92% of adults covered by Medicaid are working already, this is not going to get you to that $800 billion. So we've had the immigrants, we have work requirements. That's not going to get you to the 800 billion, not even close. I think the estimate was the work requirement thing saves 100 billion.
Yeah. So the question is, the rest of those cuts come from a number of different provisions, including like a significant cut in future expansions, and it gets complicated fast. But I guess for me, you see this kind of doomsday rhetoric anytime we talk about cutting something like Medicaid. Millions of people will lose insurance. People are going to die. And my thought is that the estimates always rely on the assumption that they don't get other health insurance, which seems to me dubious. Many of them might get married and go on their spouses. They might purchase insurance in the Obamacare exchanges, an unpleasant experience I personally just got to do recently. But if we want to be fiscally conservative or responsible at all, that's part of the problem. You brought up Doge. Doge is kind of a doomed effort because they're fiddling with waste around the margins. If you want to stop the budget disaster, you have to cut Medicare or Medicaid or the military budget as well. Trump is not willing to do that, which I think he should. But why is Medicaid treated as off limits from Democrats is what I'm asking, if they also claim they want to restore our fiscal house.
I can give a substantive answer to that, but can I ask you, didn't Trump run specifically on not cutting Medicaid? Like if he would have ran on that, on this bill right here, $800 billion in Medicaid cuts, would that have been a good pitch, or would he have
No, he ran on don't touch any of it, but also I'm going to balance the budget, which I called out at the time as like the math is not mathing.
Yeah, so when it comes to why Medicaid in particular is off, like people don't want to touch it. I can't speak for like the vast majority of Democrats, but I think that when you look at Medicaid and when you look at how this has been done in the past, you could call it a sob story. And I get what you mean. I've seen people try to turn it into that. But no, this has been tried in a few other states. It was Georgia and I believe Arkansas where they put in work requirements. And they had to remove this because 18,000, it was like 15 to 18,000 people had lost coverage due to increased red tape. So when you're doing this and you're affecting the most vulnerable communities, Democrats in general are in favor of more social safety nets and redistribution of wealth. Even the non-socialist liberals are in general for a little bit of redistribution of wealth. So going back to what I originally said, one of the main concerns is what you hear like Elizabeth Warren say, who's farther left than me, or any like center left Democrat, is that the most vulnerable communities might lose coverage due to increased red tape or just overall policies that Trump passes. And it's so that rich people can get tax cuts. Is that not fair to say?
Well, it's so that a majority of
Medicaid
people can get tax cuts, and then a lot of it flows to wealthy people because, again, they pay more taxes.
With permanent tax cuts for wealthy people. So even with that caveat, I think that's a fair gripe for Democrats to have. Say like, hey, why are you cutting coverage from the most vulnerable communities so that the vast majority of this flows into permanent tax cuts?
Yeah,
for
Blaire,
the
I'll
rich?
bring you back in here. It's not great optics, I will say that much. But are there other things in the big, beautiful bill that you think are redeeming, like, for example, the border security funding that, I mean, I at least think we sorely need?
Yeah. So, I mean, the big, beautiful bill is really big. And so, life is not black and white. So there is gray and there is nuance and there are some good things in it. But oftentimes those are the things that get you to be okay with the more nefarious things. So, for example, there is some like anti-trans minor stuff in there that I've heard that he's making it harder for trans children to get surgical.
Well, yeah, Medicaid, the health insurance program, the government health insurance program, Medicaid, will no longer cover gender transition treatments. So hormones, puberty blockers,
Right.
surgeries, anything for minors. And I believe potentially also
Which I
for
100%
adults
agree with.
on Medicaid. So yeah, you can speak to that, Blaire.
Which I would 100% agree with. And I also agree with it when it pertains to adults as well, because I think a lot of this is cosmetic and a lot of it isn't necessary. The problem with that, though, is there's still several states that are still covering sex changes for people in prison, which is like, then it's like, okay, but if people in prison, why not regular citizens? But that's another topic. The point is, that may make people who are looking at the medical stuff feel a little more safe. Like, okay, we're getting rid of like paying for these barbaric surgeries and everything that their favorite libs of TikTok and conservative influencers, speak out about, and rightfully so. But there's also stuff in the big, beautiful bill that erodes your right to not be subject to medical experiments when it comes to AI. AI making decisions about your health, and then you can't sue anybody. So it's like there's more to it than people understand. And that's why, they gave it the name for a reason, for optics. And they included things like, sticking it to the trans kid stuff, because there's other medical stuff that has dire implications for every adult and every kid as well.
Yeah, I'll just say that's why
scary.
I call me old fashioned, but I think we should go back to funding the government one department at a time rather than these massive cromnibus bills. Adam, I want to move us to our final topic, but just quickly, do you think it's fair for them to cut off Medicaid coverage for gender treatments for minors, or do you oppose that?
No, it's fine.
Okay, that's a somewhat hot take for a Democrat, but okay.
I mean, maybe. I mean, we're in a new era. We're in a new era, man.
All right.
Democrats had no choice after the election. They understood that the 90-10 issues that they're willing to sacrifice for, some of them are able to now be like, actually, we can get rid of that. Whereas
I am a very inclusive, like a very inclusive person. I'm not going to fight over whether Medicaid should include some of this stuff. My question would be, does it cover other cosmetic surgeries?
I can't tell you, but I doubt it.
Probably not.
I doubt it.
Insurance doesn't really cover cosmetic surgeries.
I will say, though, the one big, beautiful bill, I do agree with Blaire. Really solid name. I heard Caitlin Collins on CNN the other day calling it that. And I'm like, what a win.
It's
what a win for Trump to
beautiful
even name it
It's
that.
going to be the biggest, the most beautiful.
Even though it's big and costly.
Okay. And thank you guys so much for your time. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I imagine people will. They'll have to let me know in the comments.